Okay, so here's my presentation: North Korea and African relations through Blizzard in the Jungle, um, by me. So, Blizzard in the Jungle was produced in 2001 by Jo Hak Ray and Ri Chol Jun, and is affiliated with the propaganda published by North Korea. In it, we find the story of two North Korean doctors in a plane crash in Africa and how they lead the survivors to safety. In this story, by being set in Africa with doctors representing North Korea, it represents both North Korean relations in Africa as well as the current large amount of North Korean medical professions employed in Africa. And as a reminder, the two doctors are Song Chol Kim and Young Hwan Kim, I believe. Um, so, North Korea has had relations with numerous countries in Africa ever since the 1960s, when they were first established due to fellow socialist states and general opposition to European and subsequently American colonialism. So, countries like Ghana under Kwame Nkrumah, Egypt under Gamal Abdel Nasser, and Guinea under Ahmed Sekou Toure all had socialist ties and welcomed North Korean support. During the 70s and 80s, North Korea sent pilots to help Egypt during the Arab Israeli War in 1973, I believe. People to help train Zimbabwe's army forces in the early 1980s, and advisors to support uprisings in Angola, and aided Ethiopia in cracking down on dissent. And Sudan, Uganda, and South Africa have also had continuing relations. And in fact, just a couple of years ago, Zimbabwe and South Africa were highlighted in, I believe, their Independence Day celebrations and other celebrations officially by the North Korean government as a show of support. So, North Korea has maintained these relations for multiple reasons, mainly the need for hard currency, so outside support for its local isolated economy, to escape international isolation, inconsistent compliance of African countries with the international sanctions of North Korea, low cost military equipment, both being sold and being repaired, and law enforcement and national defense training, and North Korea's role in supplying guest workers to meet the labor needs in the countries that need it. So, with a large military background, arms dealing has been a huge component of North Korea's continued presence in Africa. As you can see here, missiles, radar, and air defense systems have all been sold and used in African countries, but as of late, UN sanctions have slowed the sales. However, North Korea has continued to differentiate itself from other nations like Russia in providing specialized law enforcement training and developing defensive strategies for poorer nations. So, how do North Korean doctors from the comic fit into all of this? So, North Korea's two biggest areas in which they supply guest workers to friendly African nations are in construction and public health. And at the time of the comics publishing in 2001, healthcare workers were the most employed guest workers of North Korean healthcare, or of North Korea, sorry. Countries like Tanzania, Angola, Nigeria, Algeria, Equatorial Guinea, and Ethiopia all have North Korean healthcare workers. These workers provide services to the local people and in return receive money for doing so. However, reportedly, 80% of these workers' salaries are sent back to North Korea. While this bolsters a struggling North Korean economy currently under heavy sanctions by efforts led by the U.S., among others, and also provides a hard currency backing the economy of North Korea, and even with their isolation from the rest of the world, is still able to provide support with that. This not only explains why North Korean doctors are idealized in this action comic, but also provides context as to why North Korean doctors are in Africa and why depicted Africans in the comic are displayed favorably. On top of that, the sad irony of it all is that according to the UN, working conditions for these healthcare workers are extremely poor, akin to forced labor. And after earning very little for themselves, they are not only underfed, they work up to 20-hour days while being monitored by North Korean officials posted in these countries. From a human rights report, there is a high death toll among these North Korean workers due to work-related accidents and, unfortunately, suicides, combined with North Korea's pressure to send back more money, as well as prejudice and violence from the locals. With the Americans displayed in the comic, North Korea also categorizes Americans as complainers and generally bad people. For example, you think about the hurt lady of the survivors, was constantly complaining and was scared about the North Korean doctors even touching her. You had the two dissenting survivors who ended up being killed, and the mafia who was trying to go after the survivors all depict what seemed to be Americans. So, a little bit of history. Conflicts like the Korean War in the 1950s and the continued support of efforts against North Korean initiatives is history behind why Americans were displayed in this way. And in the context of African relations, the continued UN sanctions against North Korea is spearheaded by the U.S., as well as U.S. and UN involvement in various African countries over the year is further proof, at least to the North Koreans. All in all, this novel is an interesting look into not only how North Koreans view their continued ties to African countries, but also how they want life and reality to be displayed, furthering a regime that has continued to persecute its own people through propaganda and isolation.